Welcome to the Solution Nation podcast. My name is Sean Snowday, and I'm the president of Solution Nation. Solution Nation is dedicated to providing a platform for investors to learn about Israel's most dynamic public and private companies. We interview lead venture capitalists, Wall Street analysts, investment bankers, and managers of incubators and accelerators. Today's guest is Aaron Applbaum, who is a partner at MizMaa Ventures, which invests in early-stage companies. MizMaa Ventures assists in Israeli portfolio companies commercialized in the East and West. In fact, MizMaa is the portmanteau for the Hebrew words for East and West. MizMaa is also shepherding its companies to the Gulf and has received investments from at least one Gulf sovereign wealth fund. Aaron Applbaum segments the cybersecurity industry and discusses the moats surrounding cybersecurity companies. He provides insight into the importance of marketing and developing common platform technologies in the cybersecurity space. Aaron also introduces us to three fascinating portfolio companies, Autofleet, Orca, and Hexite. Please remember that all content provided on the Solution Nation podcast and website is for educational purposes only. Nothing shall be construed as investment advice. Investment decisions shall not be made based on information, written, verbal, or otherwise, posted or spoken on Solution Nation. Conduct your own research or consult with your own investment advisors before making investment decisions. So here's my good friend, the host of the show, and the CEO of Solution Nation, David Wanatik.
All right, everyone, welcome to Solution Nation. I'm very pleased to introduce our guest today. Our guest is Aaron Applbaum. Let me just say a few things about Aaron. He has a very impressive career. He's currently a partner at MizMaa Ventures Limited. He manages the fund in Israel. He helps lead investment into early stage technology companies and continues to help those companies grow throughout their advancement. Previously, Mr. Applbaum was the director of investments at Strategic Cyber Ventures, LLC. At that firm, he helped lead the firm's efforts to identify companies for investment, as well as played the critical role throughout the investment evaluation and execution process. Before that, he was with Hudson Bay Capital Management. So, Aaron, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, David, for having me. Appreciate it.
So maybe you can tell us a little bit about MizMaa Ventures. First question I have is, what is the Perush? What is the meaning of MizMaa? And then go into the size of the fund, the stage of investments, the size of investments you make, and the industries you invest in.
Excellent. So MizMaa is a portmanteau of two Hebrew words, Mizrach and Ma'arav, which means East and West, MizMaa. And it's so named because the goal of MizMaa, the differentiator of MizMaa, is that we bridge local Israeli technologies to the world. We have offices in San Francisco, in Hong Kong, but we only invest in early stage Israeli companies. The idea being that we take a global access, global connections, global network, and laser focus all of that into Israel to help companies bridge the gap. So we help with business development, corporate development, and partner relationships, and customer relationships. What allows us to do that, and one of the really exciting things about MizMaa, is who we are as a partnership. So in Hong Kong, my partner was a 25-year JP Morgan banker. She was vice chairman of Investment Banking Asia, and so is incredibly connected through the Eastern Corridor, Japan, Korea, mainland China, Hong Kong, Singapore, Southeast Asia. In the West, our Ma'arav is a former general partner of Lightspeed Ventures, founder of Opus Capital. I manage the fund in Israel. As David mentioned, I have a background in finance for a hedge fund in Manhattan, and for a cyber enterprise software fund in DC. And it's a really complementary tapestry of talents. Recently, we hired in an operating partner role a 35-year IBM veteran, a gentleman who ran IBM Israel, was the global chief compliance officer for IBM, and then ultimately ran fintech strategy for them globally. So it's a really unique set of seasoned senior professionals. It's none of our first rodeo. When we look at a company, when we look at a startup, we know the questions to ask. We know how we can help and what we bring to the table. The rest of our team is also incredibly impressive, including an F-16 pilot, an Oxford grad, summa cum laude in mathematics, a Stanford grad, a Y Combinator grad. So it's just a really deep bench of professionals. And I mentioned we invest in early stage tech in Israel. We look at areas where Israel excels, where Israel's got some sort of unfair competitive advantage. And the areas we've identified include cybersecurity, DevOps, cryptography, AI, future mobility, so the connected, electrified, autonomous car. And we come in at the very earliest of stages, at the pre-seed and seed. So helping not only to identify and invest in the best early stage startups, but to often venture formation, actually create from the ground interesting opportunities to help entrepreneurs ideate. We're managing a couple $100 million across two funds. It's about 220 million US. We've got 30 portfolio companies, and thank God we're rocking and rolling. So I'll pause there. I know that was a lot.
Sure. So how much is the average check size that you write?
Our average check size is around 3, but we've written checks as small as $1 million and as large in an initial deployment to 6 million.
Those are pretty large checks for pre-seed companies.
Yeah, pre-seed and seed. And, one of the things that we've told ourselves and that it's a tenet of ours is a lot of the nomenclature is outdated and fluid. So today's seed was yesterday's A, and the sizes keep changing. So for us, it's really about getting in early, building the trust relationships with the entrepreneurs. Sometimes we're coming in after product market fit, and it's really just time to scale a solution. But we may be the first institutional capital to come in. So it is technically a seed, but the company might be mature, and so require some additional capital.
Okay, great. It's very interesting, the Eastern aspect you have in the colleague you have in Hong Kong that works on sourcing deals. So for the Hong Kongese and Asian investors, are they typically strategic investors that want to invest in Israeli technology to commercialize through their existing company, through their existing channels? Or are they just funds that are looking to make ROI on their investment?
Yeah, so good question. So I'd say I'll break it into two parts. The first of which is a lot of our relationships, especially the strategic ones, wind up being not investors so much in MizMaa, but customers of our portfolio companies. So we've created relationships between our fleet optimization company here in Tel Aviv to large fleets in Singapore. Or we have a company in ad fraud, sort of cyber for customer acquisition that has a huge footprint in Japan. So a lot of our relationships are at the customer level. Some of our relationships turn into direct investing into our portfolio companies. And then there are a few who have decided also to invest in MizMaa. The ones that invest in MizMaa, it's purely for financial returns. The ones that invest in the companies, it's for some combination of financial returns and strategic value. And then the partnerships are obviously just for commercial reasons. Right.
Do you have representatives in other Asian countries or only Hong Kong?
So we're a lean, mean team. Yeah, we have one investment professional in Asia.
Okay. And it's a sensitive question, I suppose, but how have things changed with investing in Hong Kong over the last year or two?
Yeah, it's not sensitive. A super good question. So luckily for us, all the investments we do are in Israel. So we don't own any Chinese, Hong Kongese assets. Mostly for us, it's access to new markets to commercialize technology. And then we take some investment dollars, but luckily it's one, we have no mainland China money, but two, we don't invest anything there, so it clears us a little bit.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned you have some investments in from Japan, but are most of the investments in Asia, are they in Hong Kong and China, or further afield?
So no, so 100% of our investments are in Israel. We only invest in Israel.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I got that. But as far as commercializing your portfolio companies, does most of the commercialization of their products happen in Hong Kong and China, or you mentioned Japan too? But is it, is that an outlier, or do you invest in? Do your companies commercialize in Korea as well? Or?
Korea as well, yeah. So we've had a Korean acquirer. So Samsung acquired one of our companies. Hyundai invested in one of our companies. Mobis is investing in one of our companies. So we're actually, I'd say Korea is probably high up on the list of partners. I'd say it's probably the most active we've been is maybe Korea, Japan, Singapore. We haven't actually had that much success in commercializing in China, but for the best.
Okay. How helpful is the Israeli government in helping you find strategic partners and customers for your portfolio companies in Asia? I know that have trade offices and conferences and tours of companies and so forth.
Yeah, we haven't employed much of their help. I've attended various events that they've thrown. We're close to the Israeli ambassador in Hong Kong, so we know the gang. But it's been mostly social and less business for us.
Okay. So since the fund is focusing on the East and West, does that include the Gulf countries? Are you doing work there as well?
Yeah. So actually, we've recently really picked up our activity in the Gulf. Mubadala, the sovereign wealth fund of Abu Dhabi, is actually a limited partner of ours, an investor in our second fund. And they're wonderful to work with. And what's really neat about Mubadala is they're a sovereign wealth fund. And so their primary goal is to, increase the purse of the country and make sure that its inhabitants are cared for. And as part of that, they're also interested in job creation, local job creation, and JVs, and bringing Israeli tech to better the ecosystem within the UAE, within Abu Dhabi. And so that has led to early, it's still, we're still figuring out exactly how to take the most advantage of it and really be true partners to them. But we are in some discussions about how to commercialize our technology in the broader Middle East.
Okay, great. What are some of the industries that you invest in?
Yeah, so we're very deep in cyber. As I've mentioned, we've invested, we're about to invest in an open source cyber company. We've invested in anti-ad fraud, in cloud security, in dev tools, security for developers. We've invested successfully in automotive. So some of our best performing companies, there's one in teleoperations, so the ability to remotely take over a car. We've invested in over-the-air updates, so a company that allows you to, just like your iPhone updates with the newest security and the newest features and the newest user interface, and cars that are now running millions of lines of code and are computers careening down highways at hundreds of kilometers an hour, and they need software updates. And so we've invested in a company that does that. One in fleet management, as I've mentioned. So I'd say those cyber and mobility are probably our deepest investment fields, but we've also succeeded in photonics, so in hardware, and in the data stack. Actually, we today announced an acquisition. One of our companies in data analytics was acquired by a big company. I think it hit the papers today. So yeah, all heavy engineering problems out of Israel are fair game.
So it seems like for many of the industries that you invest in, cyber and cloud and so forth, there are not huge barriers to entry. It seems like it doesn't require too much capital for a company to get involved in cyber development or dev development. There's probably little patenting in that space. So are there any real barriers to entry, or can any intelligent programmer start writing code and be competitive with your portfolio companies?
Yeah, I love that question. So that's part of the reason we picked our fields is because the barriers are so difficult to acquire. The moat is very deep because the skills are very difficult to acquire. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what makes the Israeli tech ecosystem special is that so much of the training comes from real world applications in the military. And Israel has to fight pretty frequent asymmetric war. And so it's all about leverage. It's about data collection, intelligence gathering, building a lot with a little, being lean. And what's brilliant about the cyber ecosystem is that there are tens of thousands of young professionals in the military who are actively hacking networks, defending critical infrastructure, defending the cloud, and all of these real world missions, life and death missions that they go on, give them a training that can't just be acquired, that can't just be learned in a university. And so it's one of the reasons that cyber in particular is not something you can just throw an infinite amount of money at. Money helps, but the know-how is so specialized, and the Israelis have it in such volumes that it makes it a very, very unique and a very special place to invest.
Okay. Would you be able to break down the cyber market at all? What are the components of cyber market, like antivirus, ransomware? Any way you can help us sort of understand cyber a little bit better?
Yeah. So you're totally right in identifying just how sprawling it is. I'll do my best. You can always segment it. These terms are made up, right? These terms are, people trying to create categories, and it's much more fluid than that. But I'd say fundamentally, you've got the endpoint, right? You've got your phone, you've got your computer, your laptop, and those are areas that folks try to hack, right? Look what NSO could do in offensive hacking. And that's Sentinel-1 is an example of an Israeli company that's made a great name for itself protecting the endpoint. You've got application security. So not the device itself, but the software running on the device, whether that's APIs, right? APIs can be hacked. Those are, protocols that are written to call information from somewhere else and elicit a response. So you've got API security within the application. You've got open source security within application security. You've got supply chain security, right? So someone builds a component and you take that component, you build on top of it, and by the time you've got a fully formed piece of software, it may have 100 different fingerprints from a dozen different organizations. And how do you know that every actor along the way is got your best interests? The answer is they probably don't. So that's at the application layer. You've got cloud security. So think about an organization might use Salesforce and HubSpot and Okta and this CRM and that ERP and all of these cloud instantiations can be nefarious, and they can exfiltrate with your data. And that's Coronet is a good example. Wiz is a recent example of a very successful cloud security company. Then you've got the securing of the data itself. So not securing the application or the device, but how do you make sure that maybe there's what appears to be a legitimate use of my data that's in fact not legitimate. So someone takes my credentials and sends a packet of data somewhere it shouldn't go. The credentials checked out. Why shouldn't he or she be able to send that data? But there are smart security companies that can identify listen, that doesn't, why are you sending, you don't do business with Russia. Why are you sending data packets to Russia? We're going to stop that, right? So that's at the data level. You've got email security, right? So the biggest vector is the human vector, right? Is phishing and spoofing and sending attachments that are bugged, and people will click on it because it looks like something they're meant to read. So email needs to be protected. You've got certain cyber vectors that are like fraud, right? So think about financial transactions. So the ones you're familiar with might be credit card fraud, right? Someone takes your credit card, they spend it. So that's not cyber per se, but once you get into the world of digital assets, buying plane tickets online, and that does become cyber. Now it's not the physical act of stealing someone's card. It may be going into the dark web and buying credentials and then using your credentials to buy a digital asset. You've got identity security, right? So I gave the example before. So you've got some companies that are saying, hey, that packet of data shouldn't have gone to Russia. You have other security companies that are saying, how do we know that's you? Two-factor authentication, dynamic authentication, and that's a burgeoning field. Then you've got IoT, right? It's not just people and computers. It's X-rays, it's pacemakers, it's automobiles, it's production facilities, it's nuclear facilities, and that's an IoT, IT, OT, information technology, operational technology problem about understanding how machines behave and what it looks like when those machines aren't behaving. And within that, you've got automotive and drones and healthcare, and so I know I've talked your ear off, and there are many, many more. But that's just to give you a sense of how broad, right? You've got vulnerability and risk management, right? You started by asking, about anti-malware and denial of service attacks. You've got a number of really, really good companies that are just saying, let's map, let's understand what your gaps are, let's help you remediate, and doing that vulnerability and risk management, understanding that attack surface, maybe even simulating those attacks, doing some penetration testing, doing some modeling, right? That's a whole genre of cyber. And then you've got the ancillary ones, right? You've got cyber insurance, right? Maybe it's a small startup that can do all the underwriting, because a cyber company would understand what the vectors are, what the weak points are, what the penetration points are, and then they're the best ones to actually underwrite the risk, not the big companies that have been doing, automotive or D&O or, so yeah, I'll pause there. I know that was a lot.
A question deals with how important marketing is for cybersecurity companies. If you look at the point of view from the buyer, even though, the buyer is sophisticated, is an IT manager, maybe they even have a cybersecurity division at a big company. There's so many startup companies, early stage companies involved in cybersecurity that I would imagine a procurement person, even a knowledgeable one on cybersecurity, would have a hard time evaluating all of these different companies to determine which is the most appropriate. So how important is marketing for these companies? So, let's say it's given that they're brilliant people doing the programming, but a lot of companies have brilliant people doing programming. So how important is marketing, and how important is it to be able to present a company, a client, with a full package of cybersecurity versus many different one-off best of breeds pieces of the cybersecurity equation?
Great questions. So you said take for granted, assume these are smart guys, assume the solution works. We're going to just, all else being equal, it's a battle for mind share. It's a battle for mind share. Are you in Gartner? Are you in Forrester? Are you featured at RSA? It's really a battle for mind share. All of those. So I spent a whole bunch of time going over all of these different cybersecurity solutions. Each one I described, just in Israel, may have a dozen competitors, may have 24 competitors. For every snick, there's a white source, and no name, there's a salt, and Wiz, there's an Orca, and yes, they'll claim they have some subtle differentiation, but me, the buyer, I have $1. Where do I put it? I have $1 and I have a problem. I get that you're telling me you're different, but I can't buy one of everything, right? And then you have huge sprawl. You have huge chief information security officers who say, I've got 50 tools. How many dashboards can I look at? How many alerts can I answer? Right? And so you need a certain level of consolidation. So marketing is really important because that represents mind share. Nobody ever got fired for buying IBM, right? It's safer to go with the big guy. You have to make them. A lot of these cyber companies are an IBM. You have to make the buyer feel comfortable. I'll be here tomorrow. I'm well funded. I'm growing as an organization. I'm servicing Fortune 500. These are all kind of marketing and pounding in that everything's going to be okay, right? Because cyber is fundamentally sold on fear, right? It's fear and loss because folks steal, and so. But a lot of it is I'm buying for today so that something doesn't happen tomorrow, and so it's a lot about marketing. And then in terms of fragmented versus consolidated, there are huge companies who, MSSPs, managed security service providers, and their whole business is, don't you worry about how many companies there are. I will take best of breed of each, and I will provide you a unified solution. Relax. I'll pull off the shelf and do the research and do the integration and do the monitoring. If you're a big company, a Fortune 500, and you have a $100 million security budget or more, then you have teams and you consolidate as much as possible. But it's important to have the best version of every solution, because if not, then you're being a little fast and loose with something that's important. So it's a balance. It's a balance between having best of breed and having the easiest. And one-stop shop is easiest. That's always a question that CISOs have to ask themselves.
Is there an effort, maybe with these system integrators you mentioned, to encourage the development of various pieces of cybersecurity with a common programming language, have some common denominators in the way that these different cybersecurity tools are architected, so they'll fit together better? So maybe I'm doing something, I have an anti-phishing software, let's say, and you have an anti-ransomware software. Is there any effort for us to do our individual programming in such a way that our two pieces can be brought together in a more seamless manner?
So seamless and easy integrations is a really important part of a successful cyber solution, whether it's a feature or a platform. If it's clunky, it's out. It can't interrupt the business, right? Imagine the CEO of a company tries to log in, is on a business trip somewhere else and tries to log in and gets blocked and can't present. And it's because, let's say he traveled to a place he wasn't before, the IP address wasn't recognized, and his thing was blocked. He's going to call up the CISO and says, I don't know what it was, but whatever it was, it's out. I, the CEO of this company, can't be, I was embarrassed in a boardroom just now. Don't ever let that happen again, right? And so it has to be seamless. It has to be easy. It has to plug into the existing tools. It has to integrate. You may use AWS for some things, Microsoft Azure for another, Google GCP for a third. You may use HubSpot. You may use Salesforce. You may use Slack. You may use Microsoft Teams. But whatever it is, it's got to be easy. It's got to be seamless. It's got to be, whether it's agentless. The big difference, and this is something that cyber folks think about all the time, is, are you building a solution that's monitoring or what's called inline? So are you alerting me that something looks fishy, or are you blocking the thing that looks fishy? Because if you block it, it is a more powerful solution because you may have saved my bacon. But if you get it wrong, the stakes are higher. If you're monitoring, I'm more lenient because my business isn't interrupted, but it requires additional time and effort to go and correct things when they go wrong, because it may alert on something, but when it doesn't automatically block or then I have to go in, I have to figure it out, I have to do my forensics, I have to go in. So it's there's no one right answer, but the balance between ease of use, the balance between blocking monitoring is something that cyber companies battle with all the time.
Do you see the emails becoming less effective as a communications tool? And do any of your companies have a solution for communications or to improve email?
I'm an email junkie. You know, I was kind of born into email. So I've done some things. This is just personally speaking. I've done some things around making the experience better. So I use Superhuman, which is sort of a nice wrapper on top of my G Suite that allows me to work a little bit quicker and, you know, use certain shortcuts, and automatically separates the emails that are to me or to a group of people or an invitation or a newsletter, because so I find there are things that make email better. It's a tough one to replace. It's a tough one to replace. I know a lot of my conversations have migrated to WhatsApp. I know a lot of companies and VCs have migrated to Slack. I don't see email going anywhere, but it's not perfect.
Yeah. All right. Maybe you can talk to us about some of your portfolio companies. I know that you do things in mobility. Maybe we can start with a mobility company in your portfolio.
Yeah. Wow. Which one to pick? Sure. I'll tell you about Autofleet. And Autofleet is near and dear to my heart because it's a company that we were at the very ground floor. I mean, not just first money in, but even part of the initial ideation. And if you think about this promise of autonomous cars, it's amazing. Fewer accidents, you don't need steering wheels, a car shows up, you get in the back seat, you can watch a movie, you can type on your laptop, you don't have to, makes commuting all the better, it optimizes traffic. It's a beautiful promise, and it's but if you think about the elevator, it still has a button that you push when things go wrong. And elevators have been around for 100 years, 100 plus years. You need a human in the loop. And that's for something as simple as an elevator that goes up and down. So now you're telling me that something going 100 miles an hour, 80 miles an hour, with radars and LiDARs and merging lanes and U-turns and kids crossing the street and school zones, and you're telling me that that's going to be a flawless solution that's not going to need a human in the loop? Phooey. There's going to be some level of human for times when the computer just doesn't know what to do. And maybe that's weather, maybe it's fog, maybe a tree falls and the car's never encountered a situation like that. There needs to be a button that someone in the back of their, you know, autonomous Waymo or their autonomous Uber can push, and some guy remote comes on and can drive the car. Maybe it's driving the car onto the sidewalk around the tree. An autonomous car will never drive on the sidewalk, but a human, you or I, might know that that's the safest thing, to momentarily be on the sidewalk to get around a dangerous, you know, tree or a dangerous, you know, animal or something. So basically what this company does is it's the network bonding, the zero latency communication protocol, the remote communication, the lossless communication, and allows a remote driver to take over. And what's great about this company is it's got this big dream of being the fully autonomous teleoperator, but it works for forklifts. It works for ports and airports and delivery robots and deforestation robots and anything that folks want to be autonomous is dangerous without a human in the loop. And the regulation is going to come in and support that. And so we're really excited about this company, already an industry leader, already with double-digit million in contract values, and it's rocking and rolling, and we're really proud because it's a deep technology with a brilliant founder that we got in early and is really performing.
May I ask if they have contracts with Waymo and Amazon? Amazon has these robots now that will, you know, travel on sidewalks, and yeah, I heard that they have some kind of remote operation available for that.
Yeah. So the two names you mentioned No, but other companies with equally large or often larger fleets. So certain OEMs, certain tier one manufacturers, another robot company that's one of the leaders in the field that supplies a lot of the companies. So not those two names, but many impressive names.
Okay. All right. Maybe two more companies in your portfolio. They can be different industries.
Yeah. I'd love to talk about. Orca AI. It's in the reason I want to talk about Orca is it's in one of the least sexy industries, but one of the ones most ripe for disruption, and that's the maritime industry. Ships. There are about 60,000 big commercial ships globally, and there's about $20 billion a year in loss from collisions. Slow moving, these are boat to boat, these are boat to dock and port, boat to buoy, you have near misses, it's loss to life, it's environmental, but I'm talking about $20 billion in direct loss, physical damage. And if you look at it and you say, how is that possible? It's because the innovation is so behind. They use radar and have used radar forever. And if you look at what happened with Mobileye, if you look at what happened in the sensor revolution when it came to cars, the maritime industry could be the beneficiary of it, and way before the automotive one. And Orca, what they've done is they've created a platform. It's a camera, RGB and infrared camera, that's put on the ship and does the route planning, collision avoidance, building the environmental models for eventual autonomy. And what's great, not only does it allow captains and shipmasters to navigate more safely, we've heard from some of the ship captains that said, listen, after the Suez Canal, the Evergreen got stuck in the Suez Canal, I feel safe because of Orca, because of what it provides me in terms of that's what gives them the confidence. These are skilled professionals and they could do it. And what ends up happening is when you're on these ships, you create this network effect. And you can actually help with the fleet management back at home base. And those who are managing the fleets can look and say, hey, listen, this guy's got a lot of near misses. He's not captaining the ship safely. You can be the insurance companies. Should I underwrite this fleet here? Should the premium be here? Should the premium be here? Should the premium be here? The data doesn't exist or hardly exists in the way that Orca provides and can give them such a robust. So it's relevant for the management, for the insurance, for the collision avoidance, for the network effect. And it's a couple of rock star Navy graduates who are actually roommates in the Naval Academy. And the CTO, his service included building autonomous maritime capabilities for the Israeli Navy. So you talk about moat, very few people have that experience, have merged sort of technology and autonomy and the maritime industry in that way. And so and they're on dozens, maybe 50 or 60 ships, millions in revenue, growing rapidly. I mean, it's a gangbusters company.
That's a very interesting company. So that's Orca, ORCA?
ORCA.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting, especially now with all the supply chain troubles. We can't afford to lose $20 billion of product on those ships. That's a very interesting one. Thank you. Okay, and your final company?
So you mentioned supply chain. So the final one I'll mention is in supply chain. Historically, the name of the game in supply chain and delivery of goods was lean. These are razor thin margins. You hold as little inventory as possible, as little storage as possible. You outsource what you can. And then you look at the world with Russia, Ukraine, China, US trade war, COVID pandemic, not enough semi-precious metals, silicon shortages, one thing after the other. You can't just be lean. You have to shift towards being resilient. And being resilient may be more expensive in the short term because it means more inventory, It means onshoring. It means increasing the amount of suppliers within your supply chain. It means maybe having multiple of your tertiary, quaternary suppliers. It may be going with a more expensive, nearer one. It may be sometimes you have to send things via plane that you otherwise would have sent via ship. But the way that the bottlenecks it creates, and this company called Hexite is looking at this global problem and helping you optimize your revenue. And sitting on top of your SAP, your SAS, whatever ERP system you're using. Maybe it's plugging into sensors at the port. It's plugging into, and it's saying, here you need to stock up on this. There you can run lean. Here you need resiliency. This is at risk because of that. And it gives you not the cheapest, not the fastest, but the revenue maximizing solution. So if you're an alcohol company, you don't just care about distillation, you care about glass, you care about grain, you care about cans, you care about all of these things. And how do you keep track, and how do you understand, you may have a ship that's stuck in the Suez Canal, stuck behind a row of ships at the Suez Canal backed up. Is it beneficial to go around and take an extra week of travel of fuel, or do you sit and wait? Well, it depends. For some goods, you need it in a week, and some goods you need it in 2 weeks. For one, it would be detrimental. For others, it wouldn't. And just this, it's an infinite permutation of issues and problems that can arise. And this is a software layer that solves it.
That's another very interesting company. How do you spell Hexite?
Hexight. And that one's still under stealth, so hasn't quite hit the market yet.
Okay, great. Another very fascinating company. Well, thank you very much, Aaron, for speaking to us. It was a pleasure to talk to you today, and appreciate you telling us more about MizMaa Ventures and the geographic scope. I wasn't aware of that, and you gave us a lot of insight into the cyber market, and you have some fascinating companies in your portfolio. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you with us.
All nice things to say. Thank you, David.